If you have spent enough time playing Left 4 Dead, the special infected begin to feel almost inevitable, like they were always meant to exist exactly as they are. The smoker punishes poor positioning, the hunter punishes isolation, the boomer punishes careless movement, and the tank punishes everything at once. Each infected has a clear purpose. Each one creates pressure without removing player control. The balance feels intentional, almost surgical, like every encounter was carefully designed to feel overwhelming but fair. But that balance did not come easily, because the infected we know today are not the original lineup. They are what survived a much darker, more experimental design phase. During development, Valve tested special infected that were far more disturbing, far more punishing, and in some cases, completely unfair. Some of these concepts went beyond normal enemies and crossed into psychological horror. Some were designed to overwhelm players in ways that broke the flow of the game entirely. Today, we are going to walk through the major cut, special infected from Left 4 Dead in development order and explain exactly what they were, how they behaved, how they affected gameplay, and why Valve ultimately decided that these creatures should never exist in the final game. The Screamer was one of the very first special infected concepts Valve ever tested, and it reveals a lot about how early Left 4 Dead experimented with fear. Unlike most infected, the Screamer was never meant to deal damage. It was designed purely as a psychological weapon. Visually, the Screamer was thin, fragile-looking, and unnaturally stretched. Its posture was hunched forward, and its mouth was permanently forced open, as if the muscles around its jaw had torn and locked into place. It looked less like a monster that attacked you and more like something that had already been broken by the infection. The Screamer barely moved. It did not charge survivors. It did not swipe or grab. It screamed. Once the Screamer detected survivors, it would release a piercing, high-pitched shriek that did not stop. There was no cooldown. There was no limit. As long as the Screamer remained alive, the director stayed permanently aggressive. Hordes never fully dispersed. Pressure never dropped. The scream pulled infected from extreme distances, turning even quiet areas into constant combat zones. Players were denied moments of recovery, repositioning, or planning. In early playtests, the result was non-stop action, but not meaningful tension. Players were not making choices. They were reacting out of necessity. There was no strategy beyond finding and killing the Screamer immediately. No creative solutions. No alternative approaches. Valve quickly realized that fear does not come from endless noise. It comes from giving players a dangerous choice. The Screamer replaced tension with irritation and fatigue, and it was cut early in development. However, its core idea lived on, later refined into the Witch, a threat that punishes sound but gives players the option to avoid it entirely. The Leaker was Valve's first serious attempt to turn the environment itself into a weapon. This infected was bloated, swollen, and visibly diseased, with its body constantly leaking infected fluids. Every step it took left behind puddles of thick contamination that spread across floors, corners, and choke points. These pools were not just visual effects. Stepping into them slowed survivors, distorted vision, and increased the likelihood of nearby infected being drawn to the area. The Leaker did not need to chase players or attack directly. Its presence alone reshaped the battlefield, changing safe routes into hazards and familiar paths into traps. On paper, it was an incredibly strong concept, one that made every movement feel dangerous. In practice, however, the Leaker disrupted the core rhythm of Left 4 Dead. Movement is survival in this game. Running, retreating, repositioning, and adapting quickly are how teams stay alive. The Leaker punished movement so aggressively that players felt trapped rather than pressured. Entire sections of maps became unusable for long periods of time. Instead of tension escalating, gameplay slowed to a crawl. Valve realized that environmental hazards needed to be readable, temporary, and limited. The Leaker was doing too much for too long. The concept was cut but not discarded. Its mechanics were refined, controlled, and eventually reintroduced as the Spitter in Left 4 Dead 2, a version that created tactical pressure without overwhelming the player. The Ratman was one of the most unsettling special infected concepts Valve ever created. Unlike other infected, the Ratman was built entirely around stealth and unpredictability. It was smaller than a normal infected, hunched low to the ground, and capable of moving quickly through vents, crawl spaces, and dark corners that players rarely watched. It blended into the environment instead of standing out from it. There were no loud audio cues, no warning sounds, no dramatic entrance. The Ratman stalked silently, waiting for players to become distracted or separated from the group. When the Ratman finally attacked, it did so suddenly and viciously. It would leap onto a survivor and deliver rapid bite attacks that drained health extremely quickly, then retreat back into the environment before the team could fully react. In early testing, the Ratman performed exactly as designed. Too well, players became paranoid. Teams slowed their pace dramatically. Every shadow, vent, and dark hallway felt dangerous. Instead of chaotic panic, the game became cautious and tense in the wrong way. Players stopped moving forward. Valve realized this went against Left 4 Dead's core identity. The game thrives on momentum, speed, and overwhelming pressure. Not slow, methodical fear. The Ratman was cut, and its mobility and aggression were redistributed into the Hunter, a threat that is fast, deadly, but clearly announced. The Meatwall was not just a special infected. It was an environmental nightmare. The Meatwall was a massive, stationary growth made of fused infected bodies, muscle, and bone. It functioned as a living barricade, sealing off hallways, staircases, and escape routes with layers of organic flesh. Survivors were forced to stop and destroy it, often while infected attacked from behind. There was no clean way around it. Visually, the Meatwall leaned heavily into body horror. It was grotesque, uncomfortable, and deeply unsettling. But mechanically, it violated a fundamental rule. Left 4. Dead should never stop players from moving forward. The Meatwall created dead time, moments where fear faded and frustration took its place. Valve decided that pressure should chase players, not trap them. The Meatwall was removed entirely. Several additional infected existed only briefly during early testing. There was a carrier infected that spawned additional infected when killed, punishing careless shooting. A blind infected that relied entirely on sound. And early suicide-style prototypes that detonated without warning. Each idea was tested. Each was removed. Not because they failed to scare players, but because they removed clarity, balance, or player agency. Valve learned something critical during development. Horror does not come from helplessness. It comes from pressure combined with the choice. Every final special infected gives players a brief moment to react. Every death feels avoidable, even when the odds are stacked against you. That design philosophy is why Left 4 Dead still works today. In the next video, we move beyond the infected themselves. We will explore cut maps, abandoned campaigns, and early concept art that reveal a very different version of Left 4 Dead. One that was darker, stranger, and almost released. Because sometimes the most terrifying content is the content that never made it into the game.